Hello everyone, this is once again Nystagmus here with yet another exciting episode of Better Know a Leader. Today's episode we take a look at the leader of Scotland, Robert the Bruce. For this video, I'll have to go over some background information because Robert the Bruce's rise to the throne and reign is quite complicated, and it does not help that he shares the time period with another folk hero of Scotland, William Wallace. This was popularized in the 1995 movie Braveheart, which I know is not great for historical accuracy, but we will point out the many errors as we go. First, the name of the movie itself, Braveheart, implies that this applies to William Wallace. However, the origin of that title comes from Sir James Douglas, who upon Bruce's death had his heart removed, placed in a silver casket, and wore it around his neck into battle, which is a mixture of creepy and awesome that I'm surprised didn't make its way into the movie. There is a newer movie called Robert the Bruce in 2019, where Angus McFadden reprises his role as Robert the Bruce. I have yet to see this movie, so I'll refrain from commenting on its historical accuracy. Okay, so to begin, we should briefly talk about the events leading up to the First Scottish War of Independence. The chaos started with the death of King Alexander III after falling from his horse in 1286, whose reign was known for its political stability. Alexander had no living sons, and so succession fell to his granddaughter Margaret, Maid of Norway. She was only 3 at the time, and fell ill and died on her way back to Scotland. At this time, a group of nobles formed the Guardians to look for the next king, which became known as the Great Cause. After the death of Margaret, there were 13 rivals that could conceivably succeed to the throne. Fearing civil war, the Guardians asked Edward I of England to arbitrate the succession. Edward I agrees to this, but pulls a total England and makes the Guardians acknowledge him as their Lord Paramount.
With Scotland is that it's full of Scots.
England seemed to do this a lot in its history. From there, Edward appoints John Balliol as king and basically treats Scotland as a feudal vassal state. Things came to a head when Edward demanded Scottish troops and monies for an invasion of France. Instead, Scotland created an alliance with France, and in 1296, England responded with an invasion of Scotland, and after the initial English success, John Balliol resigns as king. Rebellion starts after William Wallace kills the High Sheriff of Lanark. This led to a general Scottish rebellion led by William Wallace. He was then joined by William the Hardy, Lord of Douglas, and they carried out the Raid of Scone. This was one of several rebellions taking place across Scotland, including those of several Scottish nobles and Andrew Moray of the north. The movie would have you believe that Wallace was a commoner.
And whom?
A commoner named William Wallace.
And that he just had an awesome uncle that taught him how to fight, when in fact Wallace was a member of the nobility. The movie Braveheart popularized William Wallace with many of the different legends surrounding him, like this.
William Wallace is 7 feet tall.
Yes, I've heard. Kills men by the hundred. And if he were here, he'd consume the English with fireballs from his eyes.
Wallace eventually led the Scottish to victory over the English at the Battle of Stirling Bridge. Unlike in the movie where they defeated a larger English army in the open field, what actually occurred was that the Scottish caught the English trying to cross this small bridge. Although vastly outnumbered, the Scottish army routed the English army. John de Warenne, 6th Earl of Surrey's feudal army of 3,000 cavalry and 8 to 10,000 infantry, met disaster as they crossed over the north side of the river. The narrowness of the bridge prevented many soldiers from crossing together, so while the English soldiers crossed, the Scots held back until half of them had passed and then killed the English as quickly as they could cross the bridge. After this victory, Wallace became the Guardian of Scotland in 1298. Edward again invaded Scotland in 1298 and defeated Wallace at the Battle of Falkirk. Unlike in the movie, which portrayed Wallace's defeat due to betrayal by the Scottish nobles and by none the less Robert the Bruce himself, it was actually because of the superiority of the English longbowmen that were able to hit Scottish troops well out of range of the Scottish archers. After this defeat, this is where the movie really diverges, as Wallace resigned as Guardian of Scotland in favor of Robert the Bruce and John Comyn. What Wallace did in the 7 years after this until his capture in 1305 is a mystery, but he was definitely not betrayed by Robert the Bruce to the English as was done in the movie. After the chaos of the defeat at Falkirk in 1298, a series of battles occurred between the years 1298 and 306. John Comyn and Robert the Bruce came to an apparent agreement to allow Bruce to become king. However, Comyn apparently betrayed this agreement and the two quarreled over it. In the altercation, Bruce stabbed Comyn. He apparently survived this, only to be killed by 2 of Bruce's supporters. Bruce then ascended to the throne and then began a new campaign to free his kingdom. After being defeated in the Battle of Mayhaven, Robert the Bruce was driven from the Scottish mainland as an outlaw, as Edward I declared that he and his supporters would be given no quarter. Robert the Bruce returned to the mainland in 1307. King Robert's forces continued to grow in strength, encouraged in part by the death of Edward I in July of 1307. The Battle of London Hill, the Battle of Brander Pass, and the captures of Roxburgh Castle and Edinburgh Castle saw the English continually lose ground in their control of the country. The Battle of Bannockburn in 1314 was a pivotal event in the course of the war after the English were totally pushed out of Scotland. However, the English did not fully give up their claim to Scotland until 1328, a year before Robert the Bruce's death. In the movie, they portray Bruce as this politician that played both sides to achieve the throne, especially in his conversations with his father.
Lands, titles, men, power, nothing.
While no doubt that some of this is true, Robert the Bruce is nonetheless regarded mainly as a warrior king who spent most of his reign fighting for the independence of Scotland. Well, that is it for this episode of Better Know a Leader. As always, subscribe if you like our content and check us out on Twitch on Sundays for our games and Thursdays for the Civ Show podcast. Until next time.